I'm Sarah Clarke and I'm Mirvac's Group General Manager for Sustainability. I'm in Melbourne today, or Naarm, its original name, so I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri elders of the Kulin Nation, both in the distant past and all the way through to the present, and offer my respect to their traditions for caring for this country over such a long period of time. I also extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander peoples, the traditional custodians of the lands and waters of Australia, who are watching. At Mirvac, we're an organisation that has not just set big ESG targets, but we've been clear about what we mean. We're setting out plans over time and then, really importantly, delivering on those plans. We're refreshing our strategy now because we met our Scope 1 and Scope 2 carbon and community investment targets ahead of schedule. We've also made great progress towards our target of being net positive water and sending zero waste to landfill by 2030. We've delivered more than $42 million in social procurement between FY18 and FY22 by buying from social enterprises, Indigenous businesses, B Corps and charities, which is ahead of our 2025 target and on track for a total spend of at least $100 million by 2030. And we're building a strong sense of belonging in communities, with $45 million spent in verified community investment since FY18. And when it comes to our people, we have a high employee engagement of 80%, maintaining a $0 gender pay gap on comparable roles 7 years in a row, and meeting the 40-40 vision target to ensure that at least 40% of our senior roles are held by women. We're also consistently externally recognised for good performance on ESG through really high rankings and ratings through groups like MSCI and Sustainalytics. And this is our strategy. This changes everything is the name of our ESG strategy, and through it, we're committing to continuing to be a force for good. We first launched this strategy in 2014, before it was fashionable, and then updated it for its second iteration in 2018. And as we've just outlined, we've met a number of those goals that we set out in 2018 ahead of schedule. So we're going to share some of those achievements with you today, but as well, we're going to let you know what this next third phase of the strategy means for us all. Now, first we look at the E for environment. And as you know, our planet continues to warm and climate change is already at the door. So we're setting ourselves a game-changing target of eliminating Mirvac's carbon emissions. Yes, last year we did this for the emissions we control, otherwise known as Scope 1 and Scope 2. But now we're going to try and eliminate all emissions, including those we can influence but don't control. These are known as Scope 3. They include the energy used by our tenants and our residential customers, and it also includes the embodied carbon in the materials we buy. And we plan to do this by 2030 because we know our planet can't wait and we need to take action now. So our new ambition is to be net positive in carbon in Scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions by 2030. What this means is that we're taking a leadership position and we're using it to influence our suppliers and our customers to join us in eliminating every bit of carbon that we can. And then from 2030 and each year onwards, it's our intention to buy high quality, nature-based offsets to make sure that the footprint of this company is positive. And while there are key issues in the operating environment around Scope 3 emissions, such as the pace of decarbonisation and the cost of carbon, they both remain uncertain. We're motivated to share our early thinking on this important topic as a way of contributing to the broader set of knowledge sharing from our industry and our sector. And on S, social. All across this company, we make choices every day for our customers, for our communities, and for each other that can bring us together and show clearly that each of us is welcome. We know that social connections are what creates a vibrant urban life, And so we're making a commitment to invest $50 million in creating a strong sense of belonging over the next 3 years. Diversity is one thing, inclusion's even better, but belonging is something bigger. It means we have a place. This is something that we know is important to our employees and to our customers and to the communities in which we operate. And then on to G, governance. Governance means using those choices that we have to make the world better and being transparent. For many years, we've been working towards integrated reporting, which means showing our stakeholders through our annual report that the value we create is not just financial performance. It's also about the places we create, our people, the partners we serve, and the planet. More and more, we're showing that putting purpose and profit together is the way to demonstrate all these kinds of value creation. And I'm pleased to say that we're taking further steps on both the E and the S to make sure that our work is independently verified by joining the Science Based Targets Initiative and by our recent application for Mirvac to be certified as a B Corp, which means being recognised as genuinely being a force for good. If this is successful, it will make us the first major property company in Australia to stand up to this rigorous scrutiny. What are Scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions? I can appreciate that some of you will already be very familiar with these descriptions, but just as a quick refresher and for newcomers on the topic, Scope 1 and Scope 2 are those emissions that are owned or controlled by a company. Scope 1 emissions are direct emissions from owned or controlled sources. Scope 2 emissions are indirect emissions from the generation of purchased energy used by the organisation. Emissions are created during the production of the energy and eventually used by the organisation. Scope 3 are all other indirect emissions as a consequence of the activities of the company, but occurring from sources not owned or controlled by it. These are usually the greatest share of the carbon footprint, covering emissions associated with business travel, procurement, waste and water. In other words, Scope 1 emissions are the fuels we burn, Scope 2 emissions are the electricity that we use on site, and Scope 3 emissions are all those emissions outside our direct control but within our influence. The major contributors to Mirvac's Scope 3 emissions are expected to be embodied carbon, driven by purchased goods and services, as well as maintenance and repairs, and tenant and energy resident consumption. So what do we count? Our boundaries have been informed by the Greenhouse Gas Protocol's Corporate Value Chain Scope 3 Accounting and Reporting Standard, also referred to as the Scope 3 Standard, which is an internationally accepted standard and is supported by the Greenhouse Gas Protocol's technical guidance for calculating Scope 3 emissions. When we interpret it for the property sector, we've included both upstream, and that means creating our products, and downstream, which means the use of our products, as part of our emissions. So we will be counting embodied carbon in the materials we use to create our assets, waste created as part of construction, resident and tenant energy consumed from the assets we sell and lease, and the repairs and maintenance associated with our assets. The diagram on this slide shows the major sources of Scope 3 emissions expected for Mirvac in 2030, which we will review annually as data availability, market expectations, or changes to business operations happen. We have excluded some emissions categories, either because they're not applicable to us or because they're not material for Mirvac. And by not material, I mean less than 1%. The categories we've excluded are goods and services procured for the operational requirements of business activities, transport and distribution emissions for office supplies, and employee travel to Mirvac sites and offices. Coming to this process, we've led with a range of principles. As we make choices on emissions over the coming years, we've been guided by these principles and will continue to be. Firstly, we know we need to work in partnership with our suppliers and customers on this challenge, and we want to see those partnerships being accountable. We want to see, for example, our suppliers getting increasingly better at environmental product disclosures and at taking responsibilities for the emissions in the materials they supply. We're mindful too that the context on this subject is uncertain. None of us knows how fast the world will decarbonise or what the cost of things like offsets will be. What we do know, however, is that it is our role at Mirvac to create value. We've got 5 pillars of value we look to: performance, that's financial; place, in asset creation and curation; people, in people, culture and safety; partners, customers and stakeholders; and the planet, sustainability. It's important that we balance all of those pillars with care, so that if the context changes in a way that we can't anticipate from this vantage point in 2022, and our planned approach no longer makes commercial sense, we remain open to adapting this work to ensure it remains highly attentive to our pillar of financial performance. And along the way, and however our approach evolves, we are fully committed to the principle of transparency and sharing our views with you as we go. This is our footprint, and all of the numbers that I'm going to share with you here have been based on modelling, the numbers as they relate to Mirvac. Globally, businesses are responsible for approximately 37% of energy-related greenhouse gas emissions, and of this, 26% is attributed to the embodied carbon emissions in building materials and 74% to operational carbon emissions. To achieve the Paris Agreement target, the global building and construction sector needs to almost completely decarbonise by 2050. In FY19, our Scope 1 emissions looked like about 1%, Scope 2 emissions 21%, and Scope 3 emissions 78%. And the forecast emissions for Scope 3 out to FY30 is greater than 98%. The composition of our Scope 3 emissions is expected to change over the next 7 years as the grid decarbonises and as our climate continues to change. While tenant energy currently makes up around 42% of our emissions, we anticipate that will more than halve by FY30 based on current modelling. And one of the key drivers for this is the greening of the grid, which the Australian Energy Market Operator anticipates is happening at pace. Depending on how fast decarbonisation occurs in our operating environment, Mirvac's Scope 3 emissions profile may result in lower emissions scenarios or a higher emissions scenario. And these low and high forecasts for Scope 1 to 3 carbon emissions in FY30 are shown right here on the slide and are based on our carbon modelling and scenario planning, which you can read further about in our Net Positive Carbon by 2030 paper, which is on our website. And these are our key levers for change. Firstly, our in-house design and construction capability. It's a key competitive advantage for us, having a unique in-house and experienced team. As an end-to-end developer, Mirvac has got a unique capacity to design, build and operate lower carbon buildings that are more energy efficient to operate. We've found many ways to reduce a building's energy demand and consumption, including energy efficient technology, passive design, high performance facades and better insulation. In addition, our team has conducted several tenancy neighbours energy ratings for customers to support with their energy efficiency strategies. Leveraging these skills to adjust traditional designs and use new construction materials and techniques to reduce our carbon footprint. And of course, we've got great in-house sustainability expertise. We've got some really in-house expertise from achieving our Scope 1 and Scope 2 targets, where we're able to reduce our own carbon emissions to achieve net positive. For example, by building all electric buildings, we're creating the infrastructure to allow our tenants to also reduce their carbon footprint, in turn, cutting our Scope 3 emissions. Our buying power. We're able to leverage scale and purchasing power to drive change in supplier actions and improve disclosure standards. This is not going to happen without collaboration. By working closely with our industry and our suppliers, Mirvac can help drive absolute reductions in embodied carbon and influence suppliers to take responsibility for reducing their own emissions rather than passing them on to us. Through our alliances with industry bodies, such as the Australian Climate Leaders Coalition, the Materials Embodied Carbon Leaders Alliance, the Green Building Council of Australia, and the National Australian Built Environmental Rating System, NABERS, we're also active advocates for decarbonisation within the sector and beyond. We work closely with suppliers and customers and peers across the industry to influence change. Achieving our goals will also require our customers and suppliers to come on the journey with us, and we believe that the collective will exists to achieve this. So how are we going to go about this work? Our first focus is on reducing embodied carbon, and that means continuing to preference recycled content in the materials we buy. We're already targeting 25% recycled content in major materials. Dematerialising, that is using higher strength product and less of it. Using lower carbon building materials and retaining structures of buildings where that's possible. As part of this, we conduct life cycle assessments of embodied carbon in existing materials to help drive materials selection. This is also going to require working in partnership with suppliers to develop demand for lower carbon materials. Our second strategy is to collaborate with customers to reduce their emissions. This means leveraging our in-house capacity to design, build and operate highly efficient buildings that enable our customers to lower their footprint. Specifically, building all electric buildings, which is now part of our minimum design standards for commercial buildings, and pursuing all electric residential products. This makes it easier for our customers to use 100% renewable energy, with 100% renewable energy already on sold to customers across our retail, office and built to rent buildings. And our third strategy, once we've done all we can in reducing embodied carbon and collaborating with customers, is to invest in high quality nature-based offsets. So that's our intention. Our focus is to do all we can in reducing emissions within our sphere of influence. But once we can't take that any further from FY30, our intention is to invest in these high quality Australian nature-based offsets and continue to do that each year afterwards. What's next for us? We've already established important governance around how we're going to make this work at Mirvac, with a working group and a steering committee, and you'll hear from 2 members of our steering committee in a minute, as well as with board and management oversight. We'll be working in collaboration across the organisation and with industry groups, and we'll identify the key actions we'll take to reduce emissions in partnerships with suppliers and industry while balancing the commercial requirements of our business. Our plan is to put these actions together in a transition plan and to share that widely next year in 2023 and help us to set absolute emissions reductions by 2024 in line with the requirements of the Science Based Targets Initiative, which we've recently joined. And here are some case studies of work already underway across each of our asset classes. So firstly, Aspect at Kemps Creek. Aspect is set to be Mirvac's first net positive development. We're targeting a 5-star Green Star rating with LED lighting, rooftop solar systems, as well as investing in high quality offsets. And next at Heritage Lanes at 80 Ann Street. This is one of Australia's smartest buildings, embracing world-class technology, sustainability and design. We've used low carbon concrete. We're net zero carbon in operations for the base building, and we have 129 kilowatts of installed rooftop solar. There's no gas for the base building heating and hot water, and we're pursuing a 6-star Green Star building rating. And at 55 Pitt Street, this is an all-electric building which will be powered by 100% renewable energy. We're using 25% recycled content in major materials such as concrete and steel. We're diverting 95% of construction waste And we're looking at a tenant requirement for 100% renewable electricity with a 6-star Green Star design and as-built rating version 1.3. And finally, the fabric. All the residential homes at the fabric are a minimum 7-star NatHERS rating, and they're fully electric. We've got really innovative water use at that project. For example, rainwater is captured on the roofs of the homes surrounding the community park, and it's run through pipes to keep that park green. Thanks, Gavin.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for that informative update. It's certainly an ambitious target, but one that I'm sure will be welcomed by all of our stakeholders. My name is Gavin Peacock and I'm the General Manager of Investor Relations here at Mirvac, and I'm delighted to welcome into the discussion, in addition to Sarah Clarke, who obviously heads up sustainability, Sam Apps, who is our Group General Manager for Procurement and Premises, and Jason Fassot, who's our National General Manager of Design, Management and Construction. All three are part of our Sustainability Steering Committee, and we've invited them here to provide their perspectives on the task that's ahead of us. So I want to start with the first question, just thinking about, it certainly does feel like this is quite a large undertaking. I'd love to hear your perspectives, what the biggest benefits are for Mirvac and our stakeholders in pursuing these Scope 3 initiatives. Maybe starting with you, Sarah, any thoughts there?
Well, Gavin, I don't think it's going to surprise you if I say that doing this is good for the planet and it's the right thing to do. You know, we're a leading Australian property company and our sector has a very significant footprint on the planet. And so taking a leadership position and being out there and having these kinds of discussion and working within our industry to drive that industry forward is really important. But I'm sure, Sam, you've got other things to add to that.
I do, thanks, Sarah. Yeah, like, I mean, obviously it would be enough reason if it was good for the planet. I think the really great news is that if we look across our key stakeholder groups, we can see the clear benefits for pretty much all of them. I mean, if I think about our customers, we're a very customer-centric organisation. You know, it's just really going to help them with their Scope 1 and 2 emissions management. You know, in terms of fully electric buildings, helping them on the pathway to fully renewable electricity, etc. You know, this is going to contribute significantly to their sustainability goals. Our investors, clearly, Gavin, are very important to us. We always have those front of mind. I think through our RFPs for leases, for a number of years now, we've obviously seen a strong appetite for sustainable outcomes associated with the buildings that we're putting out there. And this, you know, as part, we talk a lot about this flight to quality, and to me, that's absolutely attached to the hip around to sustainability. And, you know, the 5-star plus buildings that we're delivering, that Jason's team are constructing, and delivering these quality, beautiful assets, which also are, you know, sustainable in a really leading edge way. We're getting increasingly questions around embedded carbon. Just obviously from our prospective tenants as well, but much broader into that investment community, to our debt providers and so on. So we can really see that in terms of getting our occupancy levels to where we want them to be and really making sure that we maintain and enhance the value of our assets, this is critical work for us. It's a cliche, but it's true. We're nothing without our people. I'm a relatively new recruit to Mirvac, and I can tell you that it was absolutely at the front of my decision making to join a company which wasn't greenwashing, wasn't just you know, talking the talk, but absolutely was committed to its ESG agenda and aspirations. And the Scope 3 piece is again Mirvac showing real leadership. You know, we absolutely know factually that this is so important to our people that we're leading this, we're leading the charge. And that's really manifested through, I guess, our top quartile engagement, which Sarah touched upon. And also, you know, it's pretty phenomenal, but we retain 96% of our top talent. And again, all the feedback and messaging from our people is telling us how important things like a proactive Scope 3 response is. And looking ahead, I guess I'm thinking of the other critical stakeholders like regulators and government. I don't have a crystal ball, but I think we'd all expect that in due course, particularly if companies aren't responsive, there could well be a legislated requirement to respond here. So we really believe at Mirvac, by, you know, taking the lead voluntarily, we can really hit the ground running, working with our partners across, you know, industry and with our suppliers. We can start the de-risking process around Scope 3, what might lie ahead for all of us in Australia, and really start to try and solve some of the problems and challenges, you know, recognising that right now nobody has all the answers in this space. Thanks, Gavin.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, that's very, very comprehensive and definitive. There's obviously not many other property groups out there with this level of formal targets on Scope 3. Love to hear perspectives on what some of the biggest hurdles are to achieving this ambitious target. Maybe it's one, maybe Jason, for your perspectives on.
Thanks, Gavin. So for mine, there's two real challenges that come to mind straight up. Firstly, the modelling and the capturing of data is going to be critical to the success of this task. And I think at the moment you asked 3 different consultants to measure the amount of embodied carbon in the assets that we create. You probably would get 3 different answers. So getting that baseline measurement around what is actually the size of the challenge is of critical importance. I'm an old school manager. If you can't measure something, you can't manage it. And that adage certainly rings true with this big challenge. Once we have those important baselines, we can start setting targets. And here at Mirvac, we love a target, set an aggressive target, and our teams pursue that target and usually achieve or outperform. It also means internally, when we start to speak in this language of targets and acceptable measures, that we can gain momentum and, of course, reliably report in our disclosure statements. So the modelling and data capture is an essential challenge that we need to solve. The second thing is to recognise this is not something that one person, one team, one steerco can do. This is an industry problem. So we need to use the leadership position that Mirvac has in the property sector to galvanise the whole industry around what we're trying to do, bring all the parties together. There are so many players in this. There's the designers, consultant industry, builders, suppliers, key partners, industry associations, and you need people like Mirvac or organisations like Mirvac committed to playing a leadership role, and that's certainly something that we intend to do.
Yeah, I mean, Jason, I couldn't agree more with everything that you just outlined there. And, you know, obviously playing in the procurement space, as I have done for some time now, I'm all about partnering. It's all about partnering. And this is with our customers, this is with our tenants, and as we mentioned before, with our suppliers and business partners too. And, you know, when Jason said this is something we can't solve alone, that could not be more true. You know, our accountability on this, I think, is to really think deeply about how we effectively communicate this, you know, to those partnering groups. We really, you know, need to help explain to them the benefits of being on this journey with Mirvac, you know, how it really does add to, you know, not just our value proposition, but their value proposition too. And really, in terms of innovative thinking and solving some of the problems we don't even know what they are yet, some of the ones that we do and we don't know what the solutions yet, we have to have this innovative thinking. And of course, that will come and be more productive when we do it alongside like-minded and aligned partners. And that really goes across all of our business operations and obviously right down into our supply chains as well.
It's really helpful insights. Thank you. How do we, maybe one for you, Sarah, how do we think about deciding what to include and exclude when we're determining our initial Scope 3 boundaries?
That is a really great question, and it's important to say we didn't just make it up. We have absolutely been referencing the greenhouse gas protocol to guide all of our choices, and other than things that aren't relevant or applicable, we've really only excluded aspects of categories which are immaterial. So really that's less than 1%. And what we are including are some very big sets of emissions in embodied carbon in tenant and resident energy and repairs and maintenance. So I think from a principles point of view, looking at all the areas of our value chain, we looked at it and thought, if it's material, if there is reliable data, and if it is within our influence to do something on this topic, then that is something that we should be including. It's probably important to say too that we are going through the process of developing a basis of preparation document. So that document says, what have all of our assumptions been here? How did we include and exclude different aspects? What have all of our assumptions been? What have we been guided? How have we been guided in making those assumptions? And how are we modelling? And why do we have confidence in that modelling? So we're putting together that documentation now, and we will be looking for limited third-party assurance on it. I think that's really important in terms of the robustness of our approach and the verification that we're using here.
helpful. And of course, obviously, the sustainability Scope 3 report will have more of a detail there and what's included and what's excluded. You can see in your own time. Be up on our website as well. Jason, from your perspective, what's the role of the design and construction team in being able to achieve these objectives in the process?
I think it's clear, Gav, that we've got a massive role. Sarah talked about the 26% of global emissions being embodied in the buildings that we build. We're the people that design and build those buildings. So it's an enormous task that we need to confront. I think you've got to start thinking about this by firstly acknowledging that this, in my view, was one of the great moral and ethical challenges for business at this point in human history, really. It's an acknowledgement that it's important for us to state and be clear, this is what we stand for. And what that then does is translates into our design and construction teams, of which there are nearly 500 people here in those type of roles at Mirvac. It puts this challenge right at the heart of what they do every day. And I think by declaring a position for 2030, it's clear to our staff the journey that we need to take and the outcome that we need to achieve. So the role of our design teams is, as has always been the case, is to design more efficient, effective solutions, and sustainability becomes a big part of that. For our builders, it's looking at how we procure, how we tap into our supply chains, how we think about doing that differently, and ultimately the materials that we use to build our buildings. There's going to be a journey where things change and specifications change, and we need to be leaders in adopting those changes. Our cost plan, as I talked earlier about how we need to measure, how we need to track and report. So cost planning won't just be about measurement of dollars and areas and tonnages, but equally it'll be about how much embodied carbon there is in our buildings. And ultimately our managers will have the task of producing holistic solutions for our buildings. So this is really very much plays to our core skill set and our competitive advantage of having in-house design, cost planning and construction.
Yeah, clearly a strong competitive advantage we have there. I'd just love to hear, I'm sure a lot of investors would be curious to hear your perspective, if there is much of a cost impact of pursuing this sustainable route versus traditional construction techniques?
Yeah, of course. Look, cost is a clear part of this equation. I don't think any of us are sitting here saying that we need to chase these targets regardless of the cost. So we need to factor in cost into the overall equation that we look at. Ultimately, we must still drive long-term sustainable value in the assets that we create here at Mirvac. And value is something that I think will shift, and clearly Sarah's talked about how our key stakeholders, our customers, our tenants, what they look at in terms of value in the assets that we produce. It's not just financial or cost driven. In terms of how we will approach the challenge of cost, I look to what we've done over the last 10 years in prefabrication. 10 years ago, prefabrication wasn't the cheapest option. And we've tried it, we've learned, we've iterated. And now we're at a point where prefabrication forms the basis of many of the things that we do. Some of our buildings that we've delivered are 25% prefabricated. And these are large office buildings that lend themselves to that opportunity. So there's great learnings in what we've done with prefabrication as to how we trial and iterate and learn and ultimately drive cost out of the equation.
Yeah, it's comforting and helpful to know. Maybe if we just move back to Sam, you talked a little bit about some of the benefits of our procurement strategies. Maybe you can give a little bit more detail on the role that's going to play for us in being able to achieve our Scope 3 ambitions.
Yeah, thanks, Clarke. I think that's a great segue from what Jason was just talking to there. And obviously cost is something that, you know, we are mindful in this sphere. And obviously we're conscious at Mirvac that we do have a very sizable spend. And I think, you know, the scale of that spend and the influence that that spend can have, we need to use that as a weapon for good in this space. That is what it's all about. And, you know, we talk a lot about moving relationships with our suppliers and vendors really into that partnering space. So I often say we need fewer suppliers, more partners. And I really think this Scope 3 project, it gives us an amazing opportunity to really build some like deep and symbiotic relationships with, you know, those key business partners in the space so that we can work on solutions together, which are going to yield business benefits for obviously both of our businesses, and as Sarah said, also for the planet. So, you know, it's going to take us beyond even the mitigation of carbon, which is a, you know, lofty enough aspiration in itself. But again, you know, echoing what's been said by Jason and yourself, Gavin, it's going to become a real source of competitive advantage. I think it's probably clear that, you know, to put together this really effective Scope 3 response, we're going to have a really in-depth understanding of our supply chains, you know, beyond our direct Tier 1 relationships. I mean, again, there's another incidental benefit here that this will really complement some of our other important ESG aspirations. For example, the work that we're doing in the modern slavery space, where again, we're seeking to be a leader. And I think, again, you know, this will go to de-risking our projects. You know, that's risk, I know, is a very strong focus of Jason and his team. I think having this even deeper understanding of our supply chains through this kind of initiative is really going to help further de-risking our projects and assets. Again, forward planning is going to be what's really critical here. This clearly is not something that's going to be solved by reactivity. And working together both internally across all of our business with all of the amazing subject matter expertise we have, the 500 people in Jason's team and many other corporate experts, and also our external partners and vendors. You know, we really do want to be supporting our suppliers in this space. You know, we know that they've had their own challenges with Scope 3, and we believe this is something we can collectively benefit everybody that's in playing this space. It was touched on earlier, but, you know, industry collaboration is clearly a critical thing. And again, Jason said this can't be solved alone. And again, I think, you know, a powerful response will be a collaborative industry response. You know, we've done some great work with the Property Council of Australia already in solving various problems, including things, again, like modern slavery. I think this is, again, a great opportunity to leverage that body. You know, Jason spoke to potentially the cost implications of this, and I think certainly procurement, we see that we have a key role of working with Jason and his team. You know, the way that they've worked through the pods issue, for example, is a fantastic case study. You know, clearly where we do hit cost impulse, and we know that that will be a fact. This is about me and my team getting around the business and obviously helping to identify other sources of cost mitigation. So ultimately our cost base remains as close to neutral as we can achieve. So again, I think Sarah touched on this. This is as much as possible about driving absolute carbon reductions in the materials that we buy. And where, you know, those reductions are not possible is thinking very broadly and, you know, really using our influence and encouragement of suppliers to look for specific solutions in their space, or, you know, where they might need to pursue an appropriate offsetting solution, again, with really high quality offsets that are doing the right thing. So yeah, lots of levers to explore, and yes, a challenge that I'm really forward to jumping into.
Yeah, it's helpful, and it's really clear there from all of your responses. This really is an end-to-end problem that requires the whole of MERVAC to be able to work towards, and it's good we've got people there to be able to execute on that. Maybe just to finish off, one final question, just for you, Sarah, just the role of carbon offsets in achieving these goals. Any perspectives there?
Yeah, look, I think that's a really important question, Gavin. Carbon offsets are not our first port of call. That's not the first thing that we do on this subject. We don't just keep our business exactly the same and then offset all of our emissions at the end of the day. This is about fundamental changes in our choices, using all of those key levers that, you know, we've all been talking about on this call. So that is really focusing on reducing embodied carbon and working with our suppliers. It's about really looking for renewable energy for our tenants and residential customers, because then as the grid greens, and we know it's getting green and much faster, then we're really reducing our Scope 3 emissions in that category from FY30, but certainly from FY35 it looks very positive. So once we have you know, pushed that as far as we can, and that is obviously an ongoing process, our intention is to buy offsets, and not just any offsets. So, you know, verification and quality on offsets are absolutely paramount. We will not be the only people in the market looking for offsets, and we are going to be having an approach that we've already established with buying a small quantity of offsets to offset our residual Scope 1 emissions in FY22, reaching net positive carbon in Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. And that means high quality, nature-based Australian offsets. We've partnered with Green Fleet on a Noosa hinterland rehabilitation project up until now, which is has its own partnership with the traditional owners there, the Cubby Cubby people, who say that the revegetation of land there is like soul medicine. So we see our power in buying offsets as not just being about offsetting carbon emissions, but also about really strong biodiversity and nature outcomes, as well as all of the social benefits that we can get in making good choices around who we partner with on something like that. So, you know, I guess how we mean to continue is how we've worked in the past, and looking at what we've done so far is a good indication of how we would approach this going forward.
Fantastic. Well, we might leave it there. And thank you to Sarah, Sam and Jason for your insights today. It's certainly a challenging goal we've outlined today, but one which is clearly worth pursuing in the interests of all of our stakeholders. We trust that you, our viewers, found it informative, and we've released a detailed report on our website outlining our Scope 3 emissions targets. And we look forward to providing more updates in 2023 as we put together a more detailed transition plan. Thanks very much for your time.